got to block people. If you're engaged, you got to finish. That's the number one thing. Which I've said for quite a while, a year, that Coach Beaton has done a good job of getting things targeted right, and we've identified what they're doing and we've targeted right, but that hasn't held up all the time. And from a running back standpoint and O-line standpoint, we got to do a better job of holding up and finishing blocks. And then when they do bring challenging blitzes where they're trying to overload you on one side, then it becomes the game where Gino's got to kind of figure that out and do things to get the ball in his hands.
Danny, you both run spreads. I think a lot of people think it's passing, but what you just talked about there, both sides of the ball, the front lines, key swing factor in the game is whatever one comes out better, offense, defensive lines.
I would think so. Which we're pretty even with them, I think, when it comes to O-line and D-line. They've had some injuries on their offensive line. In D-line, they've got some guys that do a good job of getting after it. So, I feel like we do too. Bruce Irvin's been playing a lot better. He's been playing with more energy. You've seen him, get after the quarterback in the last few games, and then Julian Miller's been playing well. He's been a solid force. He's been injured, but he's been playing through it, and it means a lot to him. You got guys. You got some guys that are playing, probably a little bit better than they were 6 weeks ago.
You mentioned Bruce and Julian there. This is going to be senior day for you guys. Can you talk about this senior class and what these guys meant, especially as a first-year coach coming in and establishing this program?
Yeah, that's one of the things we're going to talk about them with today. But it's the last time they're going to play here, and anytime there's transition, the guys that's hardest on are seniors. They've been through a lot since they've been here. They've been through a couple of coaching changes, and anytime there is change, those are the guys that it probably affects more than anything. And I got a tremendous amount of respect for all the seniors, but guys like Julian and Najee and Keith and Don Barclay and Rader and the list goes on. There's about 16 of them that are going to walk out there and play their last game, which is we owe them a victory. The whole team needs to play a part of that. It's not about the 16 guys that go out and play their last game, here in Morgantown. It's about everybody else that sits in these seats during a team meeting that understands that they got to do their part to try to send these guys out with a victory.
Dana, 100 years ago, Bud Grant once said, offense sells tickets, defense wins championships.
100 years ago?
Well, seems like it anyway. What I was going to say was, now you've played 12 weeks of the season or however long it is, and the 1 and 2 teams are probably the 1 and 2 best defensive teams in the country. Does that still hold? I mean, even with all the changes and all the advances in offense that we've had?
Looks like it. It looks like it. Which, there's some pretty good defenses in the Big East, which the outside perception of the Big East is when you look at the record, which the records that they are this year is the same as it's been over the last few years, minus a West Virginia team making a run, a specific year, Rutgers making a run a specific year, Cincinnati making a run a specific year. It's just been very, very competitive, and because it's been so competitive, I think the outside looking in says weak conference, and it's really not a weak conference. It's a conference that plays pretty good defense, and there's about 4 or 5 defensive teams in the Big East that are all pretty good. And again, it goes back to what I just said. I mean, it's about creating turnovers and creating negative plays and getting yourself in third down situations, which Pitt does a good job of that. And last week when we played Cincinnati, we did a good job of that. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to it. And as much as I'd like to sit here and say that we can, offensively play against anybody and regardless of what the score is, win the game, we're not there yet here. And I've been in situations at a few of the previous stops that we were in situations to do that offensively, but we're not at that point here. And I don't mind saying it, and I'm not ashamed to say it. We didn't offensively forget how to coach. It's just been a little bit of a transition. I think Coach Graham's going to do the same thing. I think that we're not as efficient as we want to be, which the longer we're at our respective jobs, we will become that.
So the outside perspective is that maybe because of the records, this is a weak conference. Were you maybe guilty of that yourself, ever looking out at the Big East years ago before you coached here?
No, I can't tell you what I was thinking subconsciously. I didn't think about it. You always worry about the team, that where you're at and what you're doing. I mean, that's the number one thing. But it's just it's a competitive conference. I mean, lines, they just look at what's happening, and it's starting to be that way everywhere. But I think here in the Big East, with 8 teams, I mean, it's just everybody's beating everybody, and that's starting to trickle into a lot of the other conferences throughout the country. It's existed here for a while.
And you get asked about recruiting every week, it seems like, but with relation to the Big 12, but Western Pennsylvania's always been really good to the program here, but in the past couple of years, not nearly what it had been before. Is that something else you try to get back into now, especially if you think about what may happen with Penn State or Ohio State and how those might open up a little bit? Yeah,
it's it's one of the areas that we identified when we started going out in the spring, and as we bring guys in, as we had guys in camp, it's one of the areas that we've identified that we want to focus on. That's all I can really say about it. I mean, I don't, there's specific areas that I said we probably don't need to focus on as much, but Western Pennsylvania has been one that I think, proximity-wise, geography-wise, we need to focus on it.
It's easier to get your foot in there if you play this team, maybe not every year, but regularly too. Do you think about that as far as when they ask for your opinion about whether you guys play again in the future?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah,
I think we should because of what it means to the community and what it means to the state and what it means to Pittsburgh. And I think it'd be really good for a number of reasons. Which you're going to want to play a lot of your games, your non-conference games. You're going to want to play them, fairly close, based on the Big 12 being a broader conference, and we're going to have to travel 4 times a year. That's going to be, quite a ways away. You're going to want to play as many games as you possibly can here. Which the biggest draw for that from a recruiting standpoint is we're going to play 7 games here. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what conference we're in or any of that, we're going to play 7 games here in Morgantown, which that's the biggest draw, because kids, regardless of where they're from, get to pick the school because they want to go to that school, not because of where they play their away games at. The number one thing is taking care of what we have here, what we have to offer here, and making West Virginia as great of a place as we possibly can from a facility standpoint, an educational standpoint, an atmosphere standpoint, and a social standpoint. So, and then you want to pick your non-conference games to where obviously you're playing most of them here, but then when you play your 1 or 2 on the road, then it's fairly close to home.
When you get asked about previous backyard brawls, I mean, are there games you've been hearing about through the years that you might not have known about previously?
Well, I've heard about a few, but one in particular. But we're it's more about with me, which is more about what happened the last week and what we had to do to beat Cincinnati, and then it switches to Pitt, which to me, when I think of Pitt, and that's the longer I'm here, the better feel I have for it. And that's a lot of off-season talk, and after being in one, then you'll be able to get some conversation, not during game week, but you get some conversation about that game reminded me of back in 1980 when this happened, or back in 1992 when that happened. That stuff happens, a lot of the off-season stuff, but right now it's pretty much worrying about yourself and getting yourself ready to play, and then watching the film, and then watching practice, and trying to get your guys prepared to play schematically, but not about what's happened in the past. That's more fan-based media, and that's more in the off-season.
Can you just talk a little bit about Tino and what, the strengths that you think he has? I know you said he's been getting better since Graham's been out. But.
You can tell it means a lot to him. He's a fiery guy that, we watch him on TV and everything, and you can tell he's got a lot of energy, and he loves to play the game, and is excited about playing it. It seems like he's on the sideline. He's always in a good mood. I don't have him watch it on TV, but he's a good player and is continuing to get better. And the longer he plays in the system, just like every quarterback that we talk about, the longer you play in the system,
through a little stretch where they were trying to go with 2 quarterbacks. Have you ever had a situation like that where you tried to operate with regularly with 2 quarterbacks, and how'd that work out for you?
Yeah, never have done it. Never have done it. Don't think it works out very good. You know, just because you always got the one guy looking over his shoulder, and if he's scared to make a mistake, then he's gonna get taken out. And, you know, you can't worry about making mistakes. You gotta expect good things to happen. You gotta be ready to play the next play when mistakes do happen, because mistakes happen all the time. And that was one of our themes going into Cincinnati was, you know, be confident, expect good things to happen. We're gonna say the same thing to them this week. Expect good things to happen, and then when they don't, you need to be ready to play the next play. Don't worry about making mistakes. You need to worry about getting out there and moving on.